Good morning, siblings, grace and peace. I'm Denise Smartt Sears, the Director of Leadership Development and Accountability, and we welcome you today to our monthly coffee chat. I'm glad to see so many of you joined us today as we welcome the General Commission on the Status and Role of Women's new General Secretary, the Reverend Stephanie York Arnold, who you will hear from shortly. So we're glad that you've joined us, and so jot down any questions that you may have because there will be a time for Q&A towards the end of our time together today. If you would, take this time to center your hearts and minds and receive this reflection, this Lenten reflection written by Reverend Kathy Gilliard. Write the vision, make it plain. A vision helps us see into the future with heart, mind, and spirit, what the eyes may not be able to. It is not just something we hope for, but something we commit to, work toward, and align ourselves around. Those who know me well know that I am a big advocate of having a plan, especially in uncertain times. Sharing it out loud to a friend or putting it on paper can be a tangible expression of faith that I can return to over and over. And yes, even the best laid plans can go awry. Interruptions happen all the time. Visions change and sometimes only become completely clear as we go along. But having some direction, intention, and resolve makes it more likely that we will get where we want to go. Be what we want to be. And of course, if our vision is aligned with God's vision, there's just no telling where things might end. Thanks be to God. So for your reflection, you might think on these words. What sort of vision are you crafting for yourself these days? And how does it align with the vision God has for you and for those around you? Let us pray. Gracious God, we thank you for the way in which you direct our lives, the past, the present, and the future. We know that all things are in your hand, so we walk faithfully, knowing that you are leading the way. And what is to come? Oh God, we cannot even imagine, for we know possibilities are endless when we put our hope and trust in you. So be with us in this hour and all that we do to lift up the importance of the Commission on the Status and Role of Women and bringing equity to women, not just in the United Methodist Church, but throughout the world. Bless us in our respective ministries and help us to be the people you've called us to be. This is our prayer. Amen. Well, friends, on Thursdays around here, we like to wear black in memory or in honor of Thursdays in Black. I see you're black, Ellen Blue, and we're glad that you're here too. So we've talked a lot about trafficking over the past few months, and we're aware that this season that led from the Super Bowl to March Madness in March can be a real difficult time or challenging time for women because it's payday for people who traffic women. And so we want to be mindful. If you see something, say something. But when I was thinking about or learning more about the movement, the Thursdays in Black, I learned that it was developed in 1970. And of course, it was brought to fruition to bring awareness, to educate, prevention, zero tolerance culture, to create that in the communities that we serve in, to build better community among one with the other, and to teach what a healthy sexual relationship or behaviors even look like. So let me share this. Thursdays in Black believes that there is a problem with sexual violence in our communities, but that a different reality is indeed possible. We maintain that sexual violence is a social problem created by historical structures such as colonialism, homophobia, white supremacy, patriarchy, and ableism, and is fostered by negative attitudes about gender, sexuality, relationships, and power. However, sexual violence is not inevitable. By working together to create comprehensive education about healthy relationships and what constitutes sexual violence, enhancing a culture that believes and supports victims and survivors, campaigning for a more equitable society, promoting an intersectional understanding of sexual violence and its relationship to other social issues, and creating a community which works together for a common goal. We can end sexual violence. Thursdays in Black actively pursues these goals for the health and well-being of the student community, the wider society, and the whole world. And so I encourage you to research a bit about Thursdays in Black. People often write us asking about Thursdays in Black, and we tell them you can purchase resources on the website of the Council of Churches and learn more, because just by wearing a button or wearing a black, wearing something black, something that would beckon another person to ask you the question, well, what does that mean? You have an opportunity to educate that person. I think it's a simple act of education and bringing awareness to sexual violence that occurs throughout the world, and how we have to stand up and fight against it and educate both our men and women, boys and girls, so that we can create a better and safe society for all people, especially women. So friends, this is the hour that you have been waiting for. And today we're going to have a conversation with Stephanie. And Stephanie has served as the pastor of First Birmingham Church for many years and has experience in both being the lead pastor and associate pastor, serving on the board of ordained ministry and having that experience as well. And now she is we don't really go to Chicago, but that's our home base. And now she is heading up as the General Secretary, the Commission on the Status and Role of Women. So we're going to learn a little bit about her and what brings her this way, and we look forward to what God has for us. So Stephanie, welcome to this space. You've already been properly installed as the General Secretary, and might you share a bit about ministry and then to this work.
Can you repeat that one time for me, Denise?
Oh, yes, internet. I'm sorry.
Kind of messing up.
Would you tell us about your journey, your faith journey? I'm not 2 years old, but your faith journey and your sense of call to this work, I said.
Gotcha. Thank you. It's great to be with all of you. I'm like, I know you're here to learn some about me, but I see all the faces and the names, and I'm like, I would really enjoy it more if I was having the opportunity to learn about all of you and where you are and where you've come from. But let me share some about myself. I'm an only child. I grew up in in Prattville, Alabama. I live in Birmingham, Alabama now. Two parents who worked together at Bell South and AT&T, and I grew up listening to my mom and the stories she shared with me about being a woman for her in an industry that was largely dominated by men in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And I said this at the installation service, but I actually didn't have the right bracelet on. I don't know if y'all can see that. So this is my mom's original ERA bracelet, Equal Rights Amendment bracelet, that if you see in the center there, it is, if I move it up to there, it's really worn. So I don't really take it out of the house because I don't want to get it messed up. But she got me my own several years ago. And to me, the bracelet is symbolic in that all of my life, it really has had woven throughout it this thread and narrative of strong women, of women who really in their own way were working towards equality and justice for all people, but that self-interest as a woman for other women. And then for me in my own ministry, just early on being faced with things that I didn't know how to name them, but something didn't feel right or it didn't seem equitable. And it's kind of like you just have this running tab of experiences until I got the right language and realized just how important that language was to articulating the experiences that I had had, that my mother had had, that countless other women have had, and really wanting to work to right those wrongs or to pave the way. I have two children. I have a husband and two children, a daughter and a son. And for me, this work, it is, I think, a lot about my daughter because she has already experienced so many things that I would love for no person, much less no woman, to experience. But it's not just about her, it's also about the world in which we want to create that my son or all people can live into, that is not encumbered with discrimination, with abuse, with harm, but allows their full potential to flourish and develop and sees them for the gifts that they bring and the gift that they are. And so when this position came available, it just seemed like the next potentially right step for me to move forward in that work of advocacy and justice, and to finally have the lane to run in where I got to champion other women and to try to move that needle forward for women and their full equality.
So you talked about a thread. Share with us some weavings that you were a part of as as you entered ministry and kind of began to chart your own path. So what I'm trying to get at is that women typically have some markers in their life when they enter the ministry that they navigate. And maybe you have one or two that you like to share, some experiences that really impacted you and in your ministry as a woman.
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say it really goes back to before until I was in formalized ministry. So, my hometown, I grew up going to Prattville First United Methodist. They are no longer United Methodist, which is sad, but many of us have experiences of that in the last few years. But I grew up attending that church. My family was very involved. And by the time I got into the youth group, I mean, I was just that kid who, I mean, I lived and breathed getting to be with my youth group. It was the place where, like, I had a large high school and it was pretty segmented in many ways until you got to youth group. And I didn't even have I don't think the mental framework to articulate that or to be fully aware of it. But my youth group, there were 20 or 30 of us who attended regularly. And that was a melding spot of all those demographics or separating, dividing points that were out in society in my high school, where everybody seemed to have safe space and equality. And again, we weren't using that language back in back in the early 90s, but that's what it was. And that really created a space for me to find my voice within the faith community and to have that validated. I can remember moments where I had my youth pastor at that time. His name was Mark McCarty. Don't know where he is today, but him just inviting me to speaking engagements. Right, one of those, we were driving to Auburn First United Methodist, and they had a large youth group, like 150 students. And he had been asked to come and speak at an event, and he invited me and some other youth to come and like storytell, like tell a meaningful story. And I always loved talking in front of people. So I was like, sweet, I would love to do that. We are driving down highway or Interstate 85 when Stephanie opens her Bible and for the first time comes upon the Timothy passages that say that women should be silent in church. I have this very vivid memory of being like, oh my gosh, like what am I going to do? My youth pastor, he had not been to seminary at that time, but like I have this snapshot memory of him being the first person in my life to kind of help contextualize scripture, to help offer me a framework of, okay, well, let me share with you some about what was going on in that community at that time. Is that fully applicable to today? And then him validating the gifts he saw in me and just offering me that support so that I went on and spoke in that church. And, that did not complete the understanding I would need or the understanding I have today, but that was a beginning point. And then I love to tell this story from my home church. And again, I had never seen a female pastor. Like my home church at that time did not have women in clergy roles. We had lots of women serving in lay roles, but my home church had just been so permissive, so willing to let me use my gifts without anyone ever questioning me or making me feel like I was less than, or, oh, we should ask a young man to do that role because you're a young woman. So there are four women. We span about the age difference of 5 years. So four women who went through the elementary education ministry, went through youth group together, went into college, and then went on to become deacons or elders within the United Methodist Church. And that was in the 1990s, early 2000s. So again, we didn't have the example of it, and yet somehow in the DNA of that congregation, I would say that was the spirit. And I would define that as a very feminine spirit that was alive and well. And that really was very transformational and forming for me, that experience. Other experiences that I've had that I think have molded and shaped me, I wouldn't put in the same category as positive. And ministry, I don't know of a woman, if she really sits down and spends time thinking about it, won't have experiences where she has felt some form of discrimination, harassment, or abuse. And when I came to those moments in ministry as an adult, those are really terrifying. And if it hadn't been, it was in the aftermath of those experiences that I came upon GCSRW's work and even learned about my local North Alabama annual conference, CSRW. And it was finding the definitions, finding the support people, calling that 1-800 confidential number, that those pieces began to be put in order for me. And knowing I had somebody not doing the work for me, but walking alongside me to help me discern what is healing for me in these moments. And it wasn't about looking for harm for other people or shame for other people, but it was about how can I, this negative thing, this hurtful thing happened to me, how can I use my voice, use the position I'm in to hopefully bring about further education, to name this, bring this into the light so that we can all look at it and discern together, is this who we want to be? Is this what we intend for our future? And then to heal from it. And those really became, honestly, some work that came out of that, my North Alabama conference, CSRW put together the Her Truth video, where we had men in our annual conference read statements about sexual harassment, discrimination, and abuse in our conference. This was probably about 10 years ago. And I had been pretty terrified in doing that. And there was a lot of anxiety in producing that because, could we do that in a way that helped and didn't hurt? And to date, that is still some of the work that I'm most proud of. And honestly, that came out of pain for myself and harm for myself that today I can say I'm not grateful for, but I feel that it has been transformed and it has molded and shaped my life for good. in a way that I think has been liberating and has empowered my voice and set me free. That had I not had those experiences, I don't know how I would have gotten to the place I feel today.
We appreciate you sharing so deeply with us, Stephanie. You mentioned earlier that when you were in youth group, it was a male youth leader who, helped support your image of women. And unfortunately, we're not always lifted up when we turn to the scriptural text. Are there or were there other men in the church, or doesn't have to be in the church? Well, I kind of mean outside of your family, who were empowering along the way. The reason why I ask you that is that it seems like when girls are young in the church, up to their high school years, middle school, high school years, they are encouraged to participate and to be actively engaged. And then there comes a time when they're like, okay, maybe not so much. That's a mild way
Yeah.
of putting it. And so I think that we as women and mothers and nurturers should help men want to mentor and encourage women along the way. And how can we build those types of relations? So the first part is, did you experience men? And then you may want to talk about what we might do to help them help us.
Yeah, that's a great question. I do have to, I mean, just when you asked that, and I know, and I promise I won't stay here, but when you asked it, the first image that popped to my mind really were, and this was the familial. I mean, my dad, his dad, and my mom's dad. So my dad's parents grew up Southern Baptist. I mean, they were, I don't know that either one of them got to have an education beyond middle school or junior high school. But they were just such faithful people to their home church, such servants. And so, what I loved about them is that when it came to faith and my call, even though they were from a denomination that would never have said this was okay, I never heard anything like that from them. I mean, they were so proud of me and always present and cheered me on and just said with great pride that our granddaughter wants to be a minister. My mom's parents were United Methodist, and my grandfather, all of my grandfather, both grandfathers and my dad's mom are deceased at this point. My mom's mother is still alive. So her husband, he was one of those folks in the local church who like lived and breathed annual conference and general conference. Like just, I mean, he would want to go to every admin board or church council board. I mean, he just kind of geeked out, nerded out about that. And I can remember even as a teenager, him just talking with me about that stuff. Like, again, he was United Methodist, so it wouldn't have been a big deal to have a granddaughter who wanted to go in the ministry, but they just really supported and helped me flourish in that regard, as did my own father. So that my closest male relationships were only ever supportive and honestly kind of like, take the lead, honey, like we will follow you. And that is true to this day. My dad is on the call anytime. I'll call my mom's cell phone because she's the only one who's got a cell phone with her. Like my dad has a cell phone, but he never keeps it on or near him. But as soon as my mom picks up the phone, it's speakerphone and both parents are there. So I have a very supportive family. Outside of that, I would say I have a memory as a teenager of that first senior pastor when you start working through that book, The Christian as Minister. Um, I had a pretty sour taste in my mouth just from some experiences I had seen in my local church that felt very political, that I watched the clergy have to dance around. And I literally remember sitting in his office when we're going through that. And I was like, okay, I want to be an ordained elder. I want to go to seminary. I'm not going to be in the local church. And I remember saying, because I don't play politics. And he laughed at me and said, I think you will. I think you'll be a senior pastor one day because you will want to do it different than how you see it done. And I kind of just stuck that in my back pocket. And, it's like those times when you have to pull that back out and go, dang, I guess I have to acknowledge he was right. But he meant that well, that I think he saw gifts in me and the determination to want to do that. The truth is, while yes, there have been situations in which men have said or done things that have been harmful. There have been as many women, if not more, who have said and done harmful things. Like I think that's one of the things we forget to talk about, is that for us as women, we struggle sometimes to really build and provide that supportive framework, and to see that there is opportunity for all of us to excel and rise, and not just one or two. So yes, while there have been men who've done things that are painful, the vast majority have been folks for whom have just been so helpful in shaping me. So I have a mentor. His name is Joe Elmore, and I know you, and he would hate this, but like truly, when I think of a person who embodies divinity and love and grace in the widest way, I think of Joe. And I think he turns 93 this summer, 93, 94. He lives probably 2 miles from my house, and actually was a member of my last church. And Joe knew me. I first met Joe when I was like 21. So I have changed and grown a lot. And I hope I continue to do that. But let's just say the version of Stephanie that Joe met in my early 20s, she knew it all. I mean, gosh, y'all, she was really bright. And everything was very cut and dry for her. There was a right, there was a wrong. Scripture said this, scripture didn't say that. I had a smaller lens through which I viewed the world, and probably stood with a more conservative perspective, theological perspective, than I do today. And and yet I still had the personality I do today. So if I thought it, I was going to say it. And so I didn't, I just said a lot that I would love to take back today. And Joe sat with me through all that, and then gave me space to grow and transform and to be on a journey, and graciously met me at every step. Um, I also had my last senior pastor, who was my supervisor, um, Keith Thompson, who is now at a Canterbury United Methodist Church. I was his associate for 8 years, and then he left our congregation and became the senior pastor at Canterbury, and I got to follow him as the senior pastor at First Church. And I think he saw, well, I know he saw within me the gifts and capacity to do that. And so he really took the opportunity to nurture and invite me into spaces that not all senior pastors invite their associates into decision making, into SPRC meetings, into budget meetings, I mean, all of that, so that I would get firsthand experience and opportunity being in the room, having the conversations. And then we would talk about that, and coach one another. And I give him a lot of credit that, had I had a different senior pastor who was threatened by me, or who didn't take an interest in developing people the way he did, I have no doubt that my future, not that it might not have still been good, but it would have taken shape in a different way. So I really see, I, I think men are vitally important to our work of inclusion and advocacy for women and for all people, because this is not about one segment of our population getting ahead of the other. It is about collaboratively working together, seeing the gifts and graces across the wide spectrum of humanity, and allowing people to shine and thrive in who they are, and in the space that they take up. And I don't think that has to be one over the other. I think we're often pitted against one another that way, and that is really harmful, because I think in the beloved community of God, there is space and desire and need for all of us. And men have played an equal part in my own transformation and shaping as women and people of all genders.
That's good. And I'm glad to hear that men have been actively involved in your journey. What role models or historical figures? So you spoke about the reverends who you've worked with along the way, and family members, but are there some historical figures that have spoken to you through the years that really resonate with you in your sort of moving forward and being challenged to move?
I'm sure there are. Well, I mean, historical. I feel like I would have needed to think off my top of my head. I'm afraid I'm not going to come up well with that. I can tell you an author. She's not historical, but who has been very transformative for me is Sue Monk Kidd. I don't know if y'all read much of her, but Dance of the Dissident Daughter. I mean, it's an older book now, and I get that, but every few years I pick it. It's actually, hold on. It's on my shelf. I mean, this is every few years I read it, and I've taught it in small groups for women and men, and I mean, it's just so transformative. I love a memoir. That's my favorite genre of writing anyway, to hear truth told through the lens of somebody's personal experience, which feels very Wesleyan to our quadrilateral. So she's not historical, but she is someone for whom I just find deep resonance within her own experience. And she's a beautiful, beautiful writer. I'm thinking of the last several years of my life, mysticism, which I do not think is antithetical to being Wesleyan and United Methodist. I feel like they marry greatly together. But the desert fathers and mothers that we don't hear as much about, but their work, their writing, their understanding of the universal Christ, those are again just places of deep resonance within my own theological reflection and formation that I hold on to. I mean, when I look at the world, I mean, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, I mean, how can she not be a historical figure that is so empowering? Her taking up space and challenging with her intellect and her voice, and yet this small stature. I just she's an icon. I think of Harriet Beecher Stowe. There are a number given time that I could think of who are just deeply move something in my heart to admire and hope in my own way to try to do the good that is mine to do in the world today.
Thank you, Stephanie, for opening up. You have that window behind you, for opening up that window and sharing a part of you with us. You may think of something else that you'd like to share, Stephanie, and of course you can interject that. But I did want to open up the chat, or you can, if Roya is our communications person for the Commission on the Status and Role of Women, and she's behind the scenes, but it's because of her that we're on the screen, so we're thankful for her. And you can raise your real hand or your virtual hand, and we can acknowledge you, or you can put your comments in the chat, and we'd love to hear from you. You may have questions or ponderings or celebrations that you want to share with Stephanie. Tell her what you're doing in your area. So it's your time. Marina, you can unmute yourself.
Thank you. I was looking for my raise hand function and couldn't find it, but I thought, well, this will do. Old school. I just wanted to tell you that I have one of those bracelets too.
Look at that. I love that.
Yeah, I ran upstairs and got it. And as a matter of fact, I've been looking to connect with COSRO because Representative Ayanna Pressley is the lead on the Equal Rights Amendment bill this year and has been supporting it and has introduced it in other years in the House. Yeah, so I would love to connect with anybody else seeking to work on making sure that that finally gets in the Constitution, especially in the present day.
Right.
Work with the faith community. I was working with Justice Revival, who has a Faith for ERA campaign.
Okay.
And they went into hiatus. So we're hoping to work with maybe the Council of Churches and the United Methodist. United Women in Faith are actually a member of the ERA coalition, the national coalition.
Okay. That's wonderful.
And we're going to be on a call shortly here at 1 a.m. Or 1 p.m. our time here in the East. So working that through, would very much like to get up with anybody else interested in furthering the Equal Rights Amendment.
Wonderful. Well, please, Marina, tell me if there's anything I can do to be a support of that. It's very clearly central and important to me. And I mean, I just can't believe that we have not.
Got it yet.
I mean, in many ways, it's kind of like our paragraph 4, article 4, ballot number 2, that we hope everybody will vote yes for. It's like, why haven't we done this already? Why is this something that has been so controversial to include women in this way? So that's great. Thank you for sharing that. I've not seen anybody else with one of those, so that's lovely.
Ellen?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Ellen, hit your unmute button.
I found that one. Okay, just could find the raise hand. So, I would want to. I have more of a comment. I was a professor at Phillips Seminary in Oklahoma for almost 20 years and developed a course called Issues for Women in Christian Ministry. And we also had a track in our Doctor of Ministry program for women, transformational leadership for women. And I've also done writing on Deaconess history and the history of UMW in 2019. And everything you said, Stephanie, just really resonates with me. We had a student body from many denominations, and so I sat with women going through the process of ordination and being in ministry, and all the things that you commented on in terms of watching women be disrespected or worse in ministry. I heard the same stories over and over and over up until I retired just a year or two ago, and still hear them from others back in my own annual conference. And it can be discouraging to know that the same kinds of resistance and the same kinds of violence and the same kinds of difficulties are happening still. And yet, on the other hand, the fact that we can come together and figure out, okay, this is going to happen to pretty much every woman in ministry. And this is how women have met that challenge before or learned to ignore certain criticisms, is helpful, because then if you know every woman goes through this, if you've got something different, it could be you. You might need to work on that. So I just want to say thank you for sharing your experiences, and hope that the work that I've done in having the gift of seeing women in different denominations can be of help to you.
Thank you so much, Ellen. Thank you for teaching and taking up that space as a woman in those areas, because that is such important work.
I see a couple of hands. At first, we're going to go to Deb, okay?
Good morning. I'm Deb Avery, and I'm the conference president of United Women in Faith in the Pacific Northwest. In the Pacific Northwest, women in clergy have been pretty common for a very long time. And but my question actually is, how do I, as conference president of United Women in Faith, help the church conference, COSRO, become more alive? In our conference, it's really a board of the church, and I'm on that committee because of my role as conference United Women in Faith president. But I find it not really, and maybe because in the Pacific Northwest, women in ministry have been common for a very long time, and I think maybe we've gotten kind of forgetful. But I think COSRO is more than just women clergy. I think it's all women who, whatever area of ministry you're in, mission and ministry with United Women in Faith, we need to be focusing on that more broadly. And, you know, we know that the United Methodist women were key to getting women ordained in the first place. And what we're noticing is women clergy coming into ordination now kind of forget that part of our history.
Yes.
And a lot of female clergies in our conference aren't really even promoting United Women in Faith in their churches. So I think we need to figure out, how do we as sisters work together and not separated by ordination? Does that make sense?
Oh, yes.
And I'm just thinking, what are some of the rest of you doing to help that happen? Thank you.
Great question.
Yeah, that is a great question. And Deb, you know, we gotta feel sorry for our siblings who are not aware of the movement of the United Women in Faith.
Mhm.
And the name has changed many times,
Many
but
times.
not the mission
Mhm.
and fierceness, really, of their movement. Is it 153 years, something like that? It's been a
156
long time, and so that takes
now.
education. Six.
And like
I'm a
25
little
name
shy.
changes.
156,
25
getting
changes.
old. Yeah, that I'm aware of. And so education seems to be the key here.
Mhm.
And you may have to kind of hold that banner. We do have United Women of Faith liaisons in COSRO units, because COSRO is not for clergy women, it is for all women.
Mhm. Mhm.
So we really kind of have to continue to keep that conversation going so that people are aware. Every local church is aware, and of course, every annual conference. I appreciate your comment. I saw Julia, did you see Julia Pritchett Gonzalez? I thought I saw her earlier, and I was going
Yeah,
to ask
I'm
her to
here.
share a little bit about what she does. Oh, Julia, would you mind just giving just a little bit of what you do? Not the whole spiel, but just maybe a little bit. She's one of our chairpersons in her annual conference, who happens to be a clergy person, but can bring some light to your need, Deb.
Yeah, this is actually a really challenging one because at the church I am currently serving, they moved away from United Women in Faith before they became United Women in Faith before I got here. So it becomes a question of how do you, if the church itself has made a decision, how do you as a pastor engage in something? We have a member of UWF, part of the COSRO steering committee here in Indiana, and trying to engage with her. And it's been a process of learning, like, okay, these are the events going on. Let's make sure we plan around this. Let's make sure we're aware of each other. And honestly, this is revealing an area where it's like, okay, I can do better. We can do better. So thank you for sharing this, Deb. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for just jumping in there. Julia, appreciate you. Crystal Wilson?
I actually think Verge had their hand up first, so I'm happy to wait if that's helpful. No? Okay. I just figure I never want to cut the line, essentially. Okay, so I have two questions, and one jumps off of what we just talked about for U70. So first is, what are your vision, like first goals that you see coming into your position, and where do you see sort of your priorities lying at the start? And then the second was very specifically around, I think, sort of what we were getting at in the last question of, where do you see laity? Because I come to these things on a regular basis. I do a lot of things. And I am laity, but almost everything is almost exclusively geared towards clergy on a regular basis. However, without us laity, you have no churches.
Totally agree with that. All of your questions are great and ones that I can tell you what I'm thinking of in this moment, but I'm not gonna be completely honest with y'all. Today is March 20th. thus far, what I have learned in this job is that the pace is like this. So in my local church work, I had a rhythm to my week that involved about a day and a half where I would work from home, which is where what you're seeing now, which involved quiet and time to think creatively and to write my sermon and to do worship planning. And like truly, like I'm an ideator, but I need outdoor space and quiet to do that. This job, I don't yet know the rhythm. If I had to tell you the rhythm, it is Zoom after Zoom after Zoom after Zoom. I have multiple to-do lists all around my desk, and I am just waiting for a block of time, which this week that will come tomorrow on Friday in the morning when I can actually begin to start doing some of the to-do lists, right? So I just don't have the rhythm yet. So when I say that, I didn't come into this job with here are my goals and my vision for the agency, because I feel like I really feel like yes, I think each leader brings that element of themselves and their goals and visions, but it's not about me. It's about the people and the board and the relationships we have and the staff. And I don't want to just like layer my opinion on top of that, but to hear and discern and let it meld together. So, number one, first would be just relationships, building relationships, getting to know people, making the connections. And I think that work is going to go on well throughout for a year easily, right? I think that's a continual layer. A lot of that really is figuring out when looking at our team, what is it that we're excelling at? Where is it that we can dig in deeper and envision in new ways? A lot of our entire team's focus right now is on paragraph 4, article 4, ballot number 2. I don't ever remember exactly if it's 30 or 32 years that we've been working to try to get the word gender included for reasons that someone cannot be denied membership. And so what is before us in paragraph 4, article 4, ballot number 2 is the word gender and ability, so that our disabled siblings and so that women can also be included in that list. And so that's really the brunt of, I feel like, all of our team's work looking as we're going into annual conference season right now. That's the short-term goal. We have a Council of Bishops meeting coming up. Never been to one of those before. But we're getting the opportunity, GCSRW is getting the opportunity to do some really essential training at that. And that's a huge honor for our agency to be invited into, to be seen really as an expert on some of, well, I mean, that is what we are, but like to be validated in that way and given that amount of time. So there's a subset of our team that is really working hard to pull that together as well. I think this is a dichotomy in which I am just now beginning to learn. Every church I've been a part of has had United Women of Faith or UMW. That has been a very strong, I mean, I feel like in the South, I don't know a church that doesn't have United Women of Faith. Now, I think it would be interesting if those churches and those women fully understood the history and the robust advocacy that United Women of Faith have done throughout those 150 plus years for our denomination and every iteration of it. Because often I think I have seen them speak of themselves in terms of bake sales and where they're giving their money and missions. But there's so much more just in what I know. But you're right, I see that very much focused on lay, and then CSRW, while it is for all women, it often gets articulated in ways that it impacts clergy women. So it really seems to me there's an opportunity for, back to relationships, for United Women of Faith and CSRW to revitalize that relationship and partnership that we have together. And I've met Sally Vonner. I haven't gotten to spend a lot of time with her. I really just got to meet her once at a dinner back in February before the transition actually happened. So she is on my list of building connections with. And then, I would also say, I think part of the work for CSRW is really digging into those local congregations, because you are right, Crystal, like even in the churches I've come from, we had to work harder to find men to be in positions of leadership on most of our teams, to making sure they were balanced, than we did women. Now, that flipped a little when we got to issues of trustees and finance. For whatever reason, we struggle, the local church does, to find women to say yes. And sometimes that is it. Because I had a church that had plenty of women who had accounting backgrounds, but they didn't necessarily want to say yes yet to those positions. So I don't know. I think it's beginning to speak some of that narrative and to do some of our monitoring work or empowering congregations to monitor themselves. I know in nominations committees every year, my nominations team, we went over it every year. We want our teams to be as inclusive as possible. And so we look at a team and we're like, okay, you've got 9 trustees. If 6 of them are already men, well, then we are not putting on 3 more men. We are going to find women who will fulfill these roles. And so I really think Cosro has a very specific lane to run in to help elevating those stories. And that is about lay women. And it is celebrating that our churches would close if women were not continuing to do what they're doing, but also finding ways to share their stories of leadership. So one thing I've been ideating on, and this would be for clergy women, but also listening to you, Crystal, makes me think for lay women too. I don't know if y'all are familiar with Reconciling Ministries Network. And if you are, then you know that for years they've been highlighting when any small group or church chooses to be reconciling, right? Like they share a picture and a little blurb about them. And in my mind, again, ideation means you don't know what it would take to pull that off. So it is just an idea. It may be a bad one or a good one. But I'm like, what would it look like for G Cosro to start a campaign where, number one, we shared every time a church appointed a woman as a pastor for the first time. We share her picture, we share the church's picture, we celebrate it. You could do the same for lay women. Like how many churches have had a lay woman chair their administrative board? Like I know my former church, like they celebrated, they did that, I don't know, 60 years ago, and she was a phenomenal older woman. She lived to be 104. And I'm like, well, what if we pulled out that picture and told that story and we post those things and share them so that we are highlighting the leadership of women, both lay and clergy. But all of that takes a network to do, right? Which if y'all haven't, I'm assuming you have because you're on this, but please make sure you're following us on social media, that you're liking and sharing and commenting on our posts. That's a really significant way in today's world to get a story out and to get people thinking in new ways, because most all people have one of these somewhere that they have access to, and they sit and they scroll, right? We just scroll and watch reels and all of that. So those are great questions, and I actually find a lot of energy, Crystal, beyond thinking how can we do a better job as Cosro highlighting how we can be a benefit to lay women.
Thanks. Verge, thank you for being so patient, and please.
Thank you. I really appreciate hearing from everyone, and it's interesting to see all of the different areas that we cover. I am the co-chair of the New England Annual Conference Cosro Committee. I also happen to be a clergy person. I wish I was late. No, only some days. We have in the past, I think 3 or 4 years ago, we passed a resolution at annual conference that we would provide an anti-sexism training for eventually everyone. We started with the cabinet and then to the leadership and moving on sort of in the various boards and agencies. And we got a little stalled because there were other groups that were providing similar types of things. And it's a 6-hour training and it's pretty intense. And it looks at some of the microaggressions, the things that people don't necessarily see, as well as kind of the intersectional ways that immigrant women of color who were born here, as well, and women who are white, immigrant, or being born here, and the different ways that some of these things play out in different communities. And so it was really a very good training, and it started with the cabinet. And there's still a lot of work to be done. The other thing that kind of derailed us was the apology at annual conference. We had, and so we're looking to follow up because there was a lot of hurt and that was expressed in response to that, like bringing up the trauma that people had experienced and are continuing to experience. And so my question was, what resources are there for living into that, the follow-up to the general conference apology?
Burge, are you saying there was a lot of hurt that women felt that like activated the pain that they had had and they wish the apology hadn't been read, or that it made y'all aware of the continued harm that was going on? I just want some further clarification.
I would say yes.
Okay.
So we had an interim bishop, and she, as I see Crystal wrote, your bishop refused to read it, the whole thing. And so our bishop also was not all that keen on doing it and wanted to pass it off to our team. And we said, well, we do not represent the institution and you do. And so we had a meeting of a variety of leaders, and sort of just even in the planning realized how traumatizing, like basically all of us sitting in the room were like triggered or activated, just talking about how we were going to do it. And so it really brought up the awareness, as one person said, not only have many people experienced this either in churches or elsewhere, but for some people, the perpetrator is actually still sitting in the room with us at annual conference.
Yes.
And so the bishop and the cabinet, we split it all up, and then we did the liturgy, which happened, and that happened like on the second day of conference. And on the third day of conference, we wrote, we had a time for people to respond. And so people were able to speak from the floor of annual conference. And so 8 or 10 people spoke. And we had really thought about how to support people when they were speaking. So we had, people who were available to be
That's
crisis
great.
support, standing with people while they were speaking. And then part of what happened was there was not a plan for how things would be followed up. And those of us who were not the bishop or the cabinet assumed the follow-up would be of a pastoral nature, which was not the case. And we should not have made an assumption. And but it also points to the problems of the system in being leaned on to be the change maker. It's not going to do that. And so we now have a new bishop, and who wasn't a part of that. And so it's easy for him to be a little more outside and objective. It's also easy for him to sort of say, well, I wouldn't have done it that way. It's like, well, of course not, because hindsight's 2020.
Right.
However, I think the harm was people saying what had been harmed. Some things were in the past and had been resolved. Some things were more current and either still happening or, in process. And then after annual conference, the response was also very harmful in terms of what people received from the system and leadership. So I think, how do we move forward? Those kinds of things. And so I didn't know what resources there are from the general conference.
So if I could you want me to jump in there, Stephanie?
Sure.
Verge, we've had some conversations around the response to the response, right? And you and some of the others on Zoom today will have an opportunity to have a deeper conversation with Becky Posey Williams when you attend the annual conference Coswell training event that's coming up next month. So we're hopeful for that. And as I recall, Becky's statement was kind of putting it back on Coswell. Like, we want to be there on the AC Coswell. She wants to be there and support you, but you know best the channels that your annual conference needs to make sure that people are cared for in the process, right? We didn't want it to be triggering, but we know that what you did is what some other annual conferences did, had chaplains, if you will, alongside the perimeters of the gathering so that they could feel some sense of support. So let's hold that conversation. I already told Becky that, so they're gonna have some questions for you, Becky, because people are still asking about what are the next steps after the apology. But I don't want Stephanie to be left out, and so Stephanie Rice has a question as well.
Thank you. Yeah, so my name is Stephanie Rice. I'm clergy in California Pacific and co-chair for our annual conference, COSRO. And I just wanted to kind of follow up on some of the things that other people had said, because as many people have expressed, our COSRO also has issues with being very clergy focused. And so one of the things that we have done is to make sure that we have co-chairs. So we have one clergy and one lay woman who are both and we share equal responsibility. Whatever the gifts and graces are of those particular people is how we tend to make that happen. And our COSRO was pretty much inactive for a solid decade, if not 15 years. And so when I shared with Deb a little bit in the chat, I think that's because on the West Coast, especially Western jurisdiction, we feel like we're past the need for these kind of things. Like, oh no, we're too progressive. We don't need to deal with sexism or racism or any of those kinds of things. And we've seen that happen over and over and over again in different areas of the conference. And so what we did was we just started meeting, and we made sure that we had time at annual conference to share that we existed. And even though we were not prepared at all, we monitored last annual conference, just did it the best that we could with what we had, and just did it imperfectly until people realized what was happening. And then more people started to show up because this is such an important thing for people. And they know, especially the women in our conference, know how difficult it is. And so they've stepped up so that they can be a part of helping this work. And our big benefit is that one of our conference staff people is also very big into COSRO. And so she's been, we've very much needed her help.
Okay.
And I know we're running short on time, but I did want to just check in on the training, because I don't know that we've gotten any other information other than the registration. So I just wanted to make sure.
So everyone should have received an email, but I know that you didn't because I couldn't get your email address. I had to go back into.
Okay, good. Well, then that makes me feel better.
No, it should make you feel better. So I apologize, but that's why I know your name. You will receive an update, Stephanie. Okay.
Excellent. And I can't wait to be with everybody. I'm so excited about it. I keep telling everybody.
We look forward to this. Like 4 of you are outstanding. I look forward to seeing you. Let me go to Kara, and then we're going to wrap it up. Thanks, Stephanie.
Thank you, Denise, and thank you so much, Stephanie, for sharing your story. I was also the first woman at a church in the North Georgia Annual Conference, and that from 2019 to 2022. So that was a ride.
Yeah.
And I grew up seeing women pastors and women leaders in church, but also kind of saw them get kicked in the teeth. And I'm thankful that that has not been my experience thus far, but I'm still young in my career. So thank you for what you do, and thank you for your leadership in this role. This isn't so much, it's a little bit of a question, but more of an observation. So I'm from Missouri, and our COSRO is absorbed into something called the values team. So COSRO is also Commission on Religion and Race and Committee on Disability Concerns. Those are all absorbed into one committee that has also just been right-sized because of disaffiliation. So now it's fewer people taking on the work of these different agencies. And perhaps like in part because of that committee's various responsibilities, I think something for us to be mindful of as COSROs across the annual conference is, I can't see everyone here, but I know that women who tend to rise in leadership tend to be more the middle class, white women. Not all of us were raised middle class, but maybe that now. And a lot of the reading that I've done in the past year has been really focused on how women who are middle class or higher up have a lot of social power, and that can be used for good or ill. And so my question is, for you as leader, do you have any initial thoughts about how to encourage us to have solidarity with other women who are not middle class or above, and women who are non-white? And are you thinking about how to support solidarity in an intersectional kind of way?
I mean, let me just say this, from the board meeting to this, I'm like, I'm just surrounded by really intelligent, thoughtful, inclusive people. That is what I have seen represented in every aspect of my 20 days in this job so far, which is a great challenge to me, and I'm grateful for it. So this is a beautiful question, Kara. And I would say it's one of those aspects I have not really gotten to yet in the job to think a lot through. But when I'm listening to you, let me circle back to, if I was telling you about how I used to have a rhythm to my week, and I have not yet gotten to what that is going to be yet in this new job. But before I took, like when I knew the job was coming and I was just dreaming about what that rhythm might be, one thing that had crossed my mind that I do think would get at this concern you're having. So here in my local context, there is a ministry. It is a United Methodist church that birthed a nonprofit out of it that's in downtown Birmingham. And it is called Community on the Rise. And it's only been around, it was formed in 2020, but it really is working with women who may be unhoused or who are very, very, very low socioeconomics, who don't have stability in their life really in any aspect. And they recycle number 5 plastic. So number 5 plastic, I almost wore the pieces of jewelry. I don't have it beside me. Anyway, they recycle number 5 plastic. So if you use a sour cream container, a yogurt container, if you go buy plants, the black container or your takeout containers, all those are going to be number 5 plastics, and they are not recycled pretty much anywhere in your local recycling. So they figure that out and they recycle them and they melt this down. They have the women who come in, they employ them. They melt it down and they make home goods and jewelry, really beautiful jewelry out of all colors of plastic. And, and then along with that, these women that are in their program, they get 2 years of free housing that is really beautifully well done. The woman who's the executive director, her family owns a furniture store. So these are beautifully furnished homes that these women get to move into. And they do emotional, spiritual kind of community support. So in my dreaming of what the rhythm might be one day, it was to have, I don't know how often, I don't know if that's every week or once a month, but they have a time on Tuesdays they call community table. And I thought going and being present with those women would be really important to keep me grounded and aware of just that breadth you're talking about, the wideness of who are we meant to be lifting up. And it's not just women who look like me or who've had access to all that I've had access to or more. I have not gotten there yet. But that is a dream and a hope. And so part of me, what I would say is, man, if every one of us in whatever rhythm worked for us, whether we're, if we're able to do that every week or every month or whatever, if we found a place in our local community that we were able to go just give even a couple of hours to begin building relationships, to know the needs of women who are different than us, who come from a different walk of life, there's no way that carrying those stories does not inform the journey that we take forward. So I guess just off the top of my head right now, I would tell you that that's been the first way I've begun to think about doing that. Outside of that, I will say in this new role as a general secretary, I've begun building relationships with folks like Gio, the chair of GCOR, Commission on Religion and Race, and that he and I were on a meeting yesterday for an hour and a half, doing a Zoom, looking at some material we were asked to review for the Council of Bishops. And I said to him, I mean, his perspective and knowledge of our worldwide connection and our central conferences and persons of disability, like it was teaching me already, listening to his examples and gleaning. And I said to him, I'm really going to appreciate building this relationship with you because you are helping me think and view things through a different lens than what I normally, than what I am born into this world. So thank you for that. I think probably I needed that just to be reminded of the importance that is not a frivolous time to say I'm going to go spend a couple of hours learning in this community here in my hometown, but that's actually important to do so that I keep as wide a vision as I can for the totality of the work that GCSRW can do. Thank you. The only other thing I want to say, just to the other questions real quick, because I know we're out of time, but for those folks who think, who in their area, I'm thinking the West, that, hey, we've achieved this, and I know y'all weren't saying that, but you're imagining why it's not going better. I would tell you, man, somebody get your listserv for all the women in your, or just people, and just ask a couple of questions, such as, tell me your story. Have you ever experienced, and give some examples of some statements, and promise to hold that confidentially. But that's what our annual conference was not very robust, or our CSRO was not very robust in our annual conference. But about a decade ago, and that's not because we thought in the South we had achieved anything, but we just began asking some questions that I would say, in my context, most people don't ask out loud, right? But even in a context where you think you've arrived, ask some women to tell their story and find a way without sharing whose story it is to tell to begin telling the whole annual conference, or in subsets, those stories. And I think you will find there is an awakening to the need of the importance of work. We can say we've achieved certain things, but when you get women talking, I think we'll find we still have a ways to go. And then to the question about what more can we do at annual conferences when those apologies have we've intended good by that, and it's not that good isn't coming from that, but there's also additional pain that's coming, or areas that we're becoming aware of weakness. I'm not saying that the cabinets and bishops don't have work they need to do, because I think we all affirm they do, but that is a space if a local annual CSRO can step up and say, you know what, we tried to take down the names of the people who spoke, and we, after that annual conference, tried to circle up with them and invited them to a time to gather, and then ritualize that. Have somebody think of a ritual that would be meaningful. We have opened ourselves up. We have said this harm. We've acknowledged we're still experiencing it. Okay, we're going to do something about that, but how do we honor that? And then give ourselves to it's almost like closing that door too. So you're not just walking around feeling wounded all the time. By doing that apology, we are bringing light to bear on something that has been painful. And that's important. Even when it's painful, it's important. We have to do it. But we don't have to walk around that vulnerable and open all the time. So some kind of ritual that acknowledges that pain, but that also says, okay, here's the safe space that we're going to come talk about this. And don't let it become a group where you're just talking about it to talk about it, where it festers and we become bitter and brittle. But okay, what is an actionable step that the 12 of us who spoke about this want to see come out of this? And begin, and I do think that is CSRO's work to do. We can say all day long we want bishops and cabinets to do that. I promise you they have got so much on their plate, even if they want to, that's just not going to rise to the top of their list. But it's in a part of our mandate. So I think we can do that. But I appreciate you bringing that up so that we can begin thinking about how do we resource those annual conferences even more so that they're prepared to do that well. Thank you.
Okay, friends, thanks for gathering today. I know we went over, but we're glad that you gave your time, and we want you to be mindful. Some of you will see in Atlanta at the AC training, April 1st to the 3rd, so we're excited about that. And please keep on your minds the ways in which you can help your annual conference get the vote out, right? Every annual conference will vote on ratifying Paragraph 4, Article 4, which will be ballot number 2 during your annual conference session. This is the ballot. This is the amendment. Stephanie's got the button that includes the words gender and ability meaning those with disabilities. And so that as we're going back and we're thinking about all the ways that we want to really bring more awareness to the work of CSRO, be mindful of the intersectionality of being a woman and having a disability and how important that is to have those categories protected in our United Methodist Church's Constitution. Go forth in grace and peace soon. God be with you. Bye-bye.